Namaskar. Time in an Indian psyche is a cyclic phenomenon. We believe in the cycles of construction, destruction, and reconstruction. We believe anything that exists paves way for something new to come up through its own destruction. So, to me, this has been a fantastic phenomenon that gives a sense of hope. For example, after calamities, after a lot of adversities, it tells us that there will be something better. And how do we turn this calamity into a virtue? And this is the story I wish to share with you. I want to share with you 3 stories where constraints have been turned into challenges and they have become the kind of beacon of hope to innovate something new and become a kind of a prototype that can change the quality of life of people through the design. One of the first is a very small installation that we did. Basically, it's called Ujasu, which means light and ventilation. Typical urban slum where millions of people live, they build houses which are covered from 3 sides in terms of shared wall with the neighbors. And therefore, in a deep long house, the last rooms invariably are pitch dark and devoid of any ventilation. So here we were intervening to essentially provide some form of light and ventilation at a very minimal, practically at no cost. So one of the things to address through was from the roof. So here is one very simple example where through a rooftop we inserted a typical empty thrown away pearl bottle, PET bottle. So this plastic bottle has a thin waist, and in the corrugated sheet, if you just make that puncture and push it in, through internal reflection, it gives a glow in the daytime in the room equivalent of substituting 60-watt electricity bulb. So this worked very well for illumination, but of course there was no ventilation. So then we devised another kind of a unit where it is kind of a fiberplast translucent dormer. So it allows for hot air to escape through convective principle, as well as it diffuses light and brings in a daylight. So this worked for both. So this is what was done with the local people in a kind of cottage industry way with the help of an NGO. And with that, there was a huge transformation in the quality of life of people. This was installed in more than several hundred, nearly close to 1,000 units, dwelling units across 2 states. And there was 1 year recording and observation of the post-occupancy effect of this. And it proved that on an average, minimum 300 rupee electricity bill saving per month per family, because now they got daylight and they did not have to depend on fan and light unduly. Secondly, minimum of 1500 rupee additional home-based economic activity income, because their working hours were longer and there was less stress on the eye. So if you think other advantages, their health index had improved, and now kids were able to sit inside and do homework and study, so even education index improved. And as a result, it almost became a social status and feature, which became also the culturally kind of a high status significance. So with a small installation, it could help economically, environmentally, as well as socially. This is another example. This is an activity center in the middle of one of the largest urban slum in Ahmedabad. This one is a multi-activity center, and here the city of Ahmedabad alone in a day produces 2,600 metric ton of the waste every day, and there is no proper system. What it does is that hundreds of trucks round the clock dump all this waste into one area called Piranha, and this has become over some decade almost 7-story tall mountain of waste. So here was a kind of idea that we were trying to convert some of this domestic and municipal waste into usable and better performing building component. Our challenge was that it has to perform better, maybe aesthetically pleasing, and be in the economic range or affordability range, which they have been otherwise using with the inferior material. So set of materials were transformed into building component. For example, fly ash brick, which is a kind of a waste produced by power generative unit with charcoal burning. So this became stronger brick, cheaper than the conventional brick, and less porous, etc. So better performing. So you can see it can be kept exposed. Similarly, waste residue from the dumpfill site, this residue was bounded, compressed, and we created a brick which was 1/4 the cost of a conventional brick and good enough for loading for its own weight, so as partition wall, etc. Similarly, the soil block with 5% cement as a binder became a kind of another walling option. Then a wooden crate. Crate is, wood is expensive, but crate wood being brittle, it's often used only for burning. Here we put it with the help of a local carpenter from the settlement into turning it into a very beautiful partition. So it became a dividing wall in that sense. Liquor bottle or glass bottles again came in handy, not only to give a beautiful glow and refractive kind of a wall with a west-facing facade and diffuse the glare at the light. It had a sparkle and dazzle, but it also became like a screen wall, jalis as we call it, with the air going through. So it was both ventilation and diffusion of the glare, and it became a very beautiful facade element in that particular place. Also, another one was that even with the high tradition of recycling, the plastic water bottles don't fetch any money in the recycling circuit. So here we tried to convert that into a building brick, so to say. So the old widows in the evening, while singing bhajan in their own homes, with simple thumb pressure, filled in the inert material into these bottles, and each bottle in that sense turned out to be almost equivalent of 2.5 rupee brick into the wall, and this has become a very performing, beautiful wall. Fenestration, window panels, there is a crate wood, there is a kind of a packaging material shaded to substitute glass wool, and that became a paneling material. Even thin micron bags, when braided, became a rope, and rope has value addition and gets sold at a unit price of per its meter. Same way, Rex kind of rope, paneling out of these FRP panels without the glass wool, and the sort of packaging material or wrapping material waste. Oil tin container, when you open it up, then that also becomes a paneling material. Wooden crate as a paneling material. Here is a rag sandwiched FRP, which becomes also the kind of roofing material. We also use the digital waste. For example, this is a CD compact disc, once corrupted, that becomes a possible paneling material. Then it also becomes ventilating sort of panel. Then oil tin container, the sheet becomes a louver, ventilator, as well as the metal scrap for the door, and various interactive elements have come in. Third was the building industry's waste. For example, something is demolished or constructed, there is a waste for which you have to pay the money. Here that waste became a resource to create flooring, and then inert material put in the kind of a below neutral zone of the slab. That became a kind of ceiling element, saving on the concrete volume, as well as even digital waste. You can see here like a earthen kind of pots, as well as electronic waste such as the keyboard has been put in the ceiling, though you don't need plaster there, and this has been put in the creche where the young toddlers, when they're sleeping looking up, that becomes an interactive ceiling, so to say. So with all this as a demonstration, it was like a collage, so that people around can also look at it and apply it. And we will happy to find that some applications have already been translated into their own homes. So this has been a multi-use center early morning it's a classroom. There is a creche, so that when the parents go out, the children are looked after by the nannies of the same settlement. It's a classroom through the day. Late afternoon, it is a vocational training program with computer literacy to the young women, and then of course the community center for festivities, etc. The third, and at a settlement scale, the story is post-earthquake. There was a massive earthquake in 2001, and there was a huge devastation in large areas of Kutch. And here there is an example of about 18 settlements that we rehabilitated. This is one of which was done on a participatory basis and in a culturally strong kind of a settlement. So this is in place called Ludia in Kutch, at the border of India in the desert. But this is the way the people build their houses. So even there was an earthquake, people had self-esteem, and these homes done in mud and thatch had reflection of their culture, their art, and their craft. So as architecture, it had to include all of this. So in rehabilitation, we took a participatory approach and tried to integrate the ethos of the traditional architecture, and yet brought in some elements of new, which there was an opportunity for. So for example, here we had whole settlement, the users gathered together. We did an interactive kit. So we first used this thermocol kit as an idea to generate a layout which they can relate to and say that there are this kind of orientation and spaces, to which they reacted. It was almost like a interactive game played, and they chose their location onto that site in the model, as well as their choice of neighbors. For example, if one clan wanted to stay together, they chose accordingly. With that, we even validated that by taking that model onto the site to understand correctly the orientation, but model would not get the understanding of scale. So here, 4 corners of the plot were put in. Once they approved all that, it was turned into a layout. And now with the same users, self-help, they became a useful resource to create their own homes, because they were expert doing that traditionally. So we used the local material, which was clay, with these binders, and with the manually pressed rim, there were blocks made. For example, 10 youth could produce 3,000 blocks every day. That as a raw material, they build their own homes, self-help. So one, they would do the best they can. Second, they would kind of earn the labor for doing their own home, so they would earn income. And third, the youngest generation now gets acquainted with this traditional know-how learned for the elder, because this is a traditional know-how typically passed on through oral tradition. So here this was a chance. Like you can see, this team now is equipped to understand and build this complicated thatch roof. So this is how even the knowledge got transferred in a first-hand experiment. Once this whole sort of a structure was ready, that was not the end. It was personalized. They used the local clay and dolled it up as per the motives and the semantics that kind of projected the ethos of their culture and their family demands and beliefs. Not only that, this was also scientific, that in a hot and dry climate, when exterior weather is very harsh, you don't want big opening to unduly kind of allow that vagary to come in. And as a result, there were small apertures, and this small window should not translate into gloomy environment within. So here you can see that walls have been plastered with white clay, as well as there is mud and mirror work, and that maximizes the reflection of a light that falls onto this. And with that, in 2.5 months, with 1/5 the stipulated cost of the construction around that time, these houses have been built, which is reflective of their lifestyle, of their aspirations, of the traditional know-how, as well as climatic and environmental response, which is best suited for insulation and the heat mitigation in a desert climate. Other amenities were also built, and through interactive process, variety of spaces between the neighbors were created. There were also newer elements introduced which was worthwhile improving the quality of life. For example, a smokeless stove, so that when women cook, They don't inhale the smoke unnecessarily, which was the thing happening there. So this would solve that problem. And in a decentralized way, at least one room gets the solar light. Rainwater harvesting, this is desert. There is drought as the norm. Here, from where we consciously dug the soil from, became a depression, and with clay strata, it became a perfect reservoir. With only 3 inches of rainfall, it became a reservoir to hold, and clay strata holds the water, so it became a reservoir and a little bit of a, barrage over there. It became check dam, so to say. It became a holding pond, and water being available in the middle of desert, there was agriculture that came about, which was totally unheard of. So the ecology of the place changed, the economy of the place changed. In addition to craft and the building skill, they even now got agriculture. And as we all know, water supports the culture, so the cultural kind of underpinnings and all that also enhanced and thrived. There was also an effort to maintain their traditional craft of embroidery, of carpentry, etc. And this was encouraged, and this was becoming their source of livelihood. In addition, now these newly created homes in a traditional way also became an attraction for tourists to go for the homestay. So this in many ways enhanced their life, etc., and yet retaining the tradition or the way of life. So these are the kind of post-construction scenarios, the beautiful interiors and unique to this place, close to their work style as well as the culture. And you can see that their modern facility and continuum of the tradition, and this is how the community benefited by the interventions of design, where cultural ethos were continued and yet newer kind of dimensions were brought in. So glamour and beauty both catch our attention, but glamour is applique and temporal, like a fashion, it can fade away, while beauty is integral and is timeless. And I believe in India we have large accumulation and repository of traditional wisdom, and if we can understand and continue that with an addition of the contemporary, it would be a perfect solution for future. So inspired by yesterday and aspired for tomorrow can be the motto. I strongly believe that design can empower and empower to improve the quality of life, and adversities, calamities can become and turn into a beacon of hope. It can become a challenge rather than a constraint to bring in something new, way further than what we used to have. Now, to change this quality of life, the approach needs to be slightly different. I believe rather than giving Gandhian currency the value, we might have to make Gandhian value itself the currency.